Welcome to Delicious and Nutritious. Where we use the best quality ingredients to cook the tastiest food. And guys, we are making our way into fall. Fall weather, amazing. Today, we are gonna introduce a treat. This is actually going to be, the recipe is not vegan, but I am going to transition it into a vegan recipe. So if you wanna use exactly what's on the recipe, you can do that. It's amazing. I am going to add a couple things and change up a couple things so we can have cinnamon spiced pumpkin chocolate chip muffins, or for short, chocolate chip pumpkin muffins. I think they're amazing. Some of you guys may be like, I don't really like pumpkin that much. Trust me on this one. Try it out for yourself before you say you don't like pumpkin, because yes, when you're mixing in the pumpkin and smelling it, it is very strong pumpkin smelling, but after it bakes into the muffin, I've had many people that say, I don't want anything to do with pumpkin muffins, be like, wow, these are incredibly good. So let's get right into it. Fall season, slam dunk pumpkin muffins right now. And before we start getting into the recipe, just a reminder guys, put your oven on for 350 degrees so it's preset before you start cooking, because we're gonna be cooking this for 22 to 25 minutes and maybe even a little bit longer if you like a little bit crisper of a muffin. Number one thing, it says nonstick spray. We do not use nonstick spray here. We have baking cups. They're gonna work just as well. The recipe calls for 1 3/4 cups of all-purpose flour. So these are also gonna be gluten-free. I have some rolled gluten-free oats organic here. My favorite brand is going to be by the brand of 1 Degree. They're sprouted. Great thing. Sprouting unlocks the nutrients to all the grains, a lot of nuts as well. It diminishes out the anti-nutrient properties that these seeds have developed over time to be able to store their nutrients until they get into the soil, and then they are sprouted in the soil to be able to unlock and grow and reproduce. So it's a protective mechanism that is overridden by sprouting. And then we have 1.5 teaspoons of baking powder. I do not like baking powder. They usually cut it with a lot of things, so we're gonna be using baking soda. 1/3 the amount of that, so that's gonna be 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda. We're gonna have 1 teaspoon of cinnamon, organic as always. We are gonna have a 1/2 teaspoon of ginger. We're gonna have a 1/2 teaspoon of salt, so I'm gonna be using my Himalayan sea salt pink today. The recipe does ask for a 1/4 teaspoon of nutmeg. I personally don't feel like nutmeg really works for my body, but if you do care to use nutmeg, you can do that. I just want to point out the cinnamon as well as the ginger as well, the properties of these. So cinnamon is a great blood sugar regulator, antioxidant, extremely good, keeps your blood sugar really even keeled. And then ginger does amazing things for the body, for the immune system, but it's also great for the intestinal health of our small intestine. So it's going to promote the balance of good to bad bacteria in the favorable manner to keep us healthy. So it's a great, great spice herb to be able to use as well. Those two are literally slam dunk herbs. And this one says 1 cup of light brown sugar. No go. So what I'm doing is I'm gonna be using maple syrup in combination with the 2 cups of, I am going to grind up my own oats and make oat flour for this recipe, and the oat flour in combination with the maple syrup is gonna help us get around using eggs. 1 can of pureed pumpkin, organic, and pumpkin actually has a good amount of fiber, so it's a great prebiotic for the gut. 1/2 cup of granulated sugar for the top. I am not gonna use this. If you do wanna use it, I would suggest brown coconut sugar. And then finally, this recipe is calling for 2 eggs, which I am also going to do without. And then this recipe does not ask for it. But my favorite part of these is going to be baking chips. So there's 2 different brands. This is gonna be Lily's. This one's gonna have no actual sugar. It's going to be stevia sweetened. I like this brand. And then the other one is gonna be in a purple packaging. You see it at Whole Foods. I'm not sure exactly what the brand is, but it is gonna be organic, and that one does actually have regular sugar in it. So if sugar doesn't seem to do too much to you and your gut is able to handle it, you can use regular sugar, or if you want to use this, you can do that as well. So basically what we're gonna do is we're gonna need 2 mixing bowls. We're gonna have 1 mixing bowl that's gonna be for all the wet and 1 for the dry, so that when we can add them together, it's not going to like separate it too much. You wanna have it all whisked together, and then you can start getting it. But first and foremost, we need to make ourselves oat flour. So how do you make flour? I have a coffee grinder here that you guys have probably seen me use before, that I never have ever put coffee in this. This is how I make all my flours. It does a great job. Look at that. Grinding up flour. Give it a rest, shake it up. And there we have ourselves some oat flour. So we're gonna need 2 cups of oat flour if you're gonna follow along with my specific recipe. So right there, that's gonna be about 3/4 of a cup. I'm gonna go ahead and do that again. At first, you guys may be like, wow, that's gonna take a really long time to make all this oat flour. It really doesn't. This thing makes about 3/4 cup every single time. So all I have to do is go ahead and do it again. And depending how thick or coarse you like the flour, it's gonna depend on how frequently you wanna do this. You could also use a food processor, but this one's so much more mobile and it's so much easier to clean that's why I use this. I put a little bit too much in this one. You can kind of hear it chug a little bit right now. All right, so there is gonna be our oat flour round number 2. So I'm gonna cap off this 2 cups right there. Rough 2 cups. Put it in. And so I think I will have 1 more round. There we go. Almost there, just a little bit more and we will be good. Bam, just like that. Maybe not the most efficient thing we've ever done, but there it is. All right, so on to the next. So this calls for a 1.5 teaspoons of baking powder. We're using baking soda, so I usually cut it by 1/3. So I'm gonna be using 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda. And then we're gonna need a 1/2 teaspoon of ginger. I usually do a little bit of a heaping teaspoon. I like the ginger in there. I think it really adds like a very unique flavor. And then we're gonna be doing 1 teaspoon of the amazing cinnamon. I do a heaping. You guys know me, I like a little bit more flavor. Then we're gonna do a 1/2 teaspoon of salt. If you guys wanna measure this, you can do it. I personally don't measure. So 1/2 teaspoon of salt going right in there, very important. Gray salt, pink Himalayan sea salt. If you don't want to do either of those, you can do regular sea salt. I just prefer to have a little bit more exotic salt. I want a little bit more of the trace minerals in there when I'm going to be consuming this. There we go. And then if you're gonna do the nutmeg, you can do the nutmeg. And then if you have a whisk, you can whisk this all together. I am just gonna be really efficient with my dishes today, and I'm gonna be using this spoon. Stir it all together. You want to make sure, number 1, you get all the spices all around, and then number 2, you want the baking soda to not clump in one area. You want to be able to have that spread around throughout. All right. There we go. All right, our dry is good to go. And next, we are on to our wet ingredients. We are fast and furious today. We want our pumpkin. Oh yes. All of the pumpkin into one place. All right, all the pumpkin out of this can. And then we're gonna need a 1/2 cup of oil. As always, guys, you already know what we're using. Can you guess it? Coconut oil. All right, so there is 1/2 cup of coconut oil. I had to heat it up a little bit with the pan to be able to get it to room temperature. And so whenever I'm doing this, I always put the coconut oil into the measuring spoon before I put in the maple syrup, because if you guys do check this out, I'm gonna go a 1/2 cup of maple syrup. Maple syrup can stick, it's sticky, but with the coconut oil in there first, looky here, virtually none in there. It's all going to make its way into the dish, which is what we're trying to maximize. And so now we need to stir all of this together. It says whisk. If you guys have a whisk, you can go ahead and do that. I do not have my whisk on me today. Just a general stir. The eggs, you know, if you're doing the eggs, it's kind of more of the whisk. So then we're gonna dump in the dry into the wet, and we are going to mix it all together. And don't forget, you want your muffin tray, your non-toxic muffin tray. If anything that you guys see here that I do use, for the most part, is going to be in the description of all the videos. I wanna make sure that you guys have access to that. I went ahead and I redid all the descriptions to my videos, and I updated with the things that I do choose, including the Oziri pan. That is going to be that non-toxic pan that I recommend. Okay, there we go. And now you can taste it. There's no eggs in here. Check the sweetness. Make sure the sweetness is good, because then we're gonna add in the baking chips in here. One forenote, if you put in hot coconut oil, be careful here now, because the baking chips can now melt. So if you wanna let it sit for a second, you can do that. And all of the bacon chips going in there. Okay, and now we are going to stir up all of the chips. Make sure we have one last stir around. If you guys don't like chocolate chips, you don't have to do this. These are dark chocolate. Dark chocolate is an amazing antioxidant. All right, and now the fun part is going to be to take these. If You Care is going to be what we use. Really, really conscious company. I am always conscious to try to not participate in products that are going to be using freshly cut trees. Not a fan of that. A lot of the toilet paper goods, if you're just buying it run of the mill, they are cutting down fresh forests to make that. That is not acceptable for me. All right, so now we are gonna go one nice scoop into all these and make a whole lot of a mess. I go ahead and make sure that I get like a scoop in all of them, and then I'll see how much is left. And then I'll go ahead and start adding to some of them just to fill them out. So these ones don't rise super crazy because we've modified them a little bit. We're not using the eggs. We're not using the baking powder, which is a little bit more of a rising stimulant, but it still comes out just equally incredible. So they may not be the most profound looking muffins. They're definitely denser muffins, but they're equally as tasty and hearty and healthy, which can't go wrong with all those in combination. Okay, so now this is gonna go in the oven, the 350 degrees for 22 to 25 minutes. We will check on it in a little bit and we will be right back. Alrighty, there we have it, our pumpkin chocolate chip muffins. Let's go. So one thing, if you guys don't already know this, I'm sure a lot of you do, if you have a toothpick, you put it down, you pick it up out of a muffin, and if it does not have any residue on it, that means that the muffin is done. Granted, these are vegan, they do not have anything that's gonna harm you if you're concerned about that scenario. So these muffins are served best if you wait for a second. Notice they're a dense muffin, they don't rise crazy. And this one's gonna be extremely hot. Woo, that's toasty. Remember how dirty this was? It kind of cleaned up a little bit as well. Really easy pan to wash. So before eating this muffin, I would recommend letting it sit for a little bit of time. You can eat it a little bit on the warmer side, but as they sit and set, the muffins get a little bit more dense and a little bit more hearty, which I think is really beneficial for these particular muffins. And for the grand finale, it's time to try the muffin. They're delicious, absolutely delicious. I love this. Like I said, when you cook the pumpkin just kind of disappears a little bit. We have the little bit, barely. You can barely taste the ginger, kind of gives it a little bit of a bite. Chocolate works really well in there. Man, these are one of my favorite muffins, period. Hands down, I absolutely love these. So thank you guys, everyone, for cooking. Make sure to drop in the comments and let me know how they came out for you guys, and also share this recipe for anybody that's going into the fall season and wants to impress anybody out there with their cooking game. So I just want to say thank you guys for cooking another delicious and nutritious meal with me. I'm excited to cook more delicious and nutritious meals together so we can keep changing the world one bite at a time. Enjoy your recipe.